Good morning and welcome back. I hope that for those of you who were around for the 9 a.m. Singapore time session with Piyush Gupta from Sequoia, you'll agree with me. That was really very interesting. Piyush gave us a very good overview to sectors and industries, uh, spoke a lot about Sequoia's own portfolio in the region, and also underscored the central bedrock role that online payments and wallets are playing as being key e-commerce enablers. He talked a lot about distribution being key and how that's going to make all the difference in the world post-COVID. So that's actually a terrific way to transition to the second session of this morning, which is a fireside chat featuring two heavy hitters, as I'd like to call them this morning. So first of all, we have Mr. Anthony Seow from DBS. Anthony is a senior managing director at the bank, and he leads the payments and platforms group. So for friends in Singapore and the region, if you have any issue with your PayLah, you know who to accost.
Thank you so much.
Secondly, we have with us Aman Narain, who's Google's new payment ecosystem lead. Aman is and I'm quoting him here, banker turned Google. Like all others in this conference, including myself, he claims to have seen the light, and he claims to be making a lot of difference in his new role. This chat will be very interactive. In addition to the questions that I've received in advance, I will also take selective questions from the audience, for which I would request you all to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom application windows. So let's kick things off. Anthony, could you perhaps in just 30 seconds describe what you actually do at DBS? And Aman, as for you, could you take 30 seconds and describe how payments is set up as a group within Google and your specific role within ecosystems? So maybe Anthony, over to you first, and you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me here. Basically, my role at DBS in Singapore is that my title says it, in terms of I look after the payments and platforms role for DBS here in Singapore. So what does payments and platforms mean? So for payments, essentially, it covers things like cards, your traditional payment instruments like cards. And I also do the PayLah, which is actually the new digital payment that we have here with the bank. Then on platforms, essentially what we're trying to do is, if you look at PayLah, it's actually a multi-function app. So, you can book movie tickets. It's more like a platform, right? So that's basically what I look after here in DBS.
Aman?
Yeah, hi, Raj. And before I kick off, congratulations to you and John on building Smartkarma and everything it is. I don't know about seeing the light, but what we are doing at what I do at Google in Google Payments. Google Payments is very much fundamentally part of our suite of products. It's very uniquely positioned because most Google products are headquartered out in Mountain View or out west, and this is a capability where the leadership is or the leader of the function is actually based here in Singapore. So it's very exciting for Google from that perspective. It's a very long answer, but I'll try to answer this in a short way. Is that Google Pay has traditionally been a folder of cards. We've got over 1,000 financial institutional partners, and we're in some 28 to 30 countries. But we did something pretty interesting in the last couple of years in India, where we grew our user base very significantly by thinking about things more than cards, thinking about accounts, thinking about merchants, thinking essentially about how do we build a great consumer experience. So Singapore for us is the first market outside India that we have launched with this new full suite of products, and we are now targeting the United States and with the eye to bring this to the globe, and I'm part of that process.
Terrific, Anthony and Aman. That's really helpful, and it sets the scene for a dialogue across the session. So let's talk very briefly about the role that banks and also the role that big techs are now playing in changing how all commerce happens. Traditionally, niches and spaces have been carved out very separately for these two types of industries, big tech and big banks. But we're starting to see a confluence of sorts. So what I want to understand, and it's a real opportunity that we have both of you here, can big tech and big banks collaborate truly, or will they collaborate for a while and then end up competing? How do you see this play out? And Aman, maybe we can start off with you for the tech perspective.
I mean, the fact that Anthony and I, who work outside this as well, are on this conversation is probably a good lead indicator that they can. I think at Google we've been very specific about our approach to this, and we've chosen to work with banks rather than the other way around. And we've taken great pains to stay out of the money flow, for example, here in Singapore. Allow banks to do what they're great at in terms of building risk profiles and understanding the consumer, and for us to do what we are good at in terms of building ecosystems. Having said that, it's not just good news. It is hard, right? I mean, I think Anthony will tell you that as well. I mean, tech firms, as you know, Raj, are engineering driven, and banks are have been largely business driven in the past, and that results in a different approach to things. So it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of communication. It takes a lot of keeping the eye on the long-term prize. And it also helps to have people who worked in both areas. That's not just a plug for myself, but like people also on the business side, on the banking side, who've actually worked in technology. So whenever we find that, it really works well. But it's early days, and it's promising.
Yeah, for us, I think it certainly is possible. Like what Aman mentioned earlier, I think what's important is that there must be some kind of alignment strategically, because otherwise, let's say, for example, if it's a big tech and they have that mind of actually moving the space we're at, I think some point down the road, you're going to cause some conflicts, right? Because trust is going to be an issue. So I think like what Google and DBS have is actually a strategic partnership right now, and we see actually a very strong alignment in terms of where we're trying to head, what we're trying to achieve, and we don't see us actually competing. But once that strategic direction is quite clear, there's non-competing, then a lot of things can happen. And the good thing also, like I said, we are quite aligned in terms of what we're trying to do, right? So like Google, for example, in terms of where they are with us on the strategic partnership with regards to Google Pay, payments for us actually is something very, very important. And we see Google actually fitting in very, very nicely. For example, I think the previous speaker that mentioned when you talk about quality of fintechs and all that, like we see Google as well as a big tech, they have that distribution, right? So that to us actually a very, very good partnership. While we have good distribution here, it doesn't hurt to have another good partner that has good distribution as well. I think also another thing that I find that we have very good alignment is the fact that we are very customer-centric, right? So we are very concerned about customer journeys. And we talk about customers, not just consumers, but the merchant as well. So how can we help them, right? How can we help commerce happen? How can we make things easy, good user experience, security? So there's a lot of similarities in terms of what we believe and a lot of alignment there. And that's why it is possible, if those things are aligned, for big tech to actually sort of partner with banks.
That's really interesting. And for me, a big takeaway there is that it seems that banks and big tech have somehow stumbled around a strategic collaboration blueprint. And if that blueprint can be made sustaining and enduring, then actually it's great news for the consumer, but probably really bad news for the early stage startup trying to make its way into the exciting world of online payments. So I've got a question here, talking specifically about the customer. You spoke a lot about experiences that you're creating for customers. I mean, for me, and I'm putting my customer hat on here, my experience when I switch from one wallet to another or one payment app to another doesn't change that much yet. So I'd like to understand from you guys, how can you create a fresh and unique experience for customers, and also, I guess, for merchants who are equally important and on the other side of that pipeline?
Aman, you want to take it first?
Yeah.
should I go first, or Aman?
Yeah, go ahead, Anthony.
Okay, so actually, I tend to disagree, because if you really get into the details, right, you can really make it very, very different, right? So as an example, let's say like for us here in Singapore with PayLah, right? Let's say you compare, like there are some capabilities that we have that other wallets don't, as an example, in e-commerce, right? So if you like, for us, we have this equivalent, what we call card and file, like in the cards world, where you enter your credentials one time, and then essentially you don't have to sort of type in your credentials again for the next purchase. Now, as an example, in Singapore for us, you can just key in your phone number, store it there, and that's it, right? Now, a phone number is easier than a 16-digit. So that's one example. Now, for us, actually, that's why coming back, why I hate payments and platform, because I see when we digitize payment, right, and payments are digital, there's actually a lot of opportunities for us to actually change the customer journey. So some of the things we worked on, for example, is this, right? When I embed the payment in there, I even create value-added services, like, for example, order, pay, collect. You can actually go to a food court, which we have done, and experimented with. Instead of queuing up at the food court to buy what you want and pay electronically, you can actually sit down, hit order, when it's ready, go collect, and you don't have to worry about payments. So we're trying to, because it's digital, we're trying to go after the Uber kind of experience, right? Compared to, let's say, the taxi of the old days. So the Uber experience today is book a car, is waiting for you, get in the car, reach your destination, get out, don't have to worry about payments. So we're trying to get that kind of seamless customer journey. So that's how we are really differentiating. And we see payments and platform being very, very closely integrated. And that's why I think, we can actually make a difference.
I'll just, Raj, I think Anthony covered it. I will react or take the bait on a comment you made earlier, which is that about startups. For us, it's very important to enable startups, and what we're doing on the Google Pay platform is allowing also, we've got a capability called Spot, which allows merchants to actually build their own Spot or interact with consumers. And we've been doing a bunch of work on food there, and we do that by using 5 or 6 different varying degrees of startups in Singapore. So we're very much focused on enabling startups, and we think that actually helps us considerably as we try to go wide.
Thank you, Aman, and thank you, Anthony. So both of you spoke quite a bit about the sort of the contactless experience, the sort of Uber-like simplicity with which payments can occur in the future. I wonder if there is a confluence or a necessary confluence that's required between messaging or chat and payments for us to see not only that simplicity flow through to the customer, but also to see that giant S-curve adoption, because the masses in emerging markets where you guys are focused at the moment seem to be very glued on to their chat platform. So to summarize, is chat a necessary part of the adoption toolkit?
Do you want me to go, Anthony?
Yes, sir.
So I think let me put it this another way. Let me ask you a question. I mean, is great user experience or great infographic capability good for research? Or necessary for research? We've seen that at Smartkarma, right? Like we've seen you guys use it to augment what you already do, and I think that's true also for payments. Can payments continue to happen without conversational user experience? Absolutely. But we believe, and again, in India, as you may be aware, we have a conversational capability that we're also bringing to Singapore now as part of that move. And that's really fundamentally important, I think, to augment that experience, to humanize payments. I think, as Anthony was referring to, it works for a small business interaction where it's a multi-part payment with a tailor, for example, that you're getting a shirt made with, or if you're talking to friends or splitting a bill or doing that, it makes that so much more human. And so these things are really hard to build. And this is, to Anthony's point, this is where Google has the skills and capabilities to do that, and where we augment with a bank to be able to enable that. So the answer is yes, but it's not critical.
Yeah, for us, actually, you know, I think eventually some way it will happen. Like, for example, again, we have also experimented and enabled conversation commerce to happen actually on a chat platform, right? It's actually on Messenger. I'm sorry, Aman. So we've actually worked with partners to enable small businesses that, like, for example, coffee shops, you know, where they sell coffees and all that, where you're able to use Messenger to actually order and pay, right? So we are actually diving into that. But I guess right now, where is a challenge for us, and I think where big tech like Google will be helpful eventually when they, you know, develop it and all that, and we can write on it. Certainly, you know, it's something that we explore. So I can't really say it, but we're also exploring something else right now in terms of chat-based kind of payments. So even, for example, let's say you're chatting with a friend, you want to pay your friend on the chat, you can actually sort of effect that payment. So these are some of the things that we'll keep working on. Yeah. So certainly, I think the whole point is that we just want to be where consumers are, so that they can do what they want to do. It should not be like, well, you want to do this, you got to come over here. So our thing is about being customer centric and to be where they are, and we want to enable what they want every day to be.
Thank you. You know, one thing that's quite common to both of you and the companies you represent is your cross-border MNCs. I've always wondered if regulation still continues to pose a hurdle to online payments going truly regional or global, for that matter. I mean, behind the scenes, do you see you developing several silos, one for each country, and then trying to make it all work on a mesh? Or do you actually see the payment platforms genuinely going global?
I focus is right now to get local payments right, but I don't think it's impossible. It's harder to get the cross-border, but if you don't have the local payment stuff, then doing cross-border seems to be the sort of the follow-on step for that. And it is a lot more. There are many more considerations to take in, but it's certainly not possible.
Yeah, for us, I mean, we are exploring right now expanding the use of PayLah overseas, but like what Aman said, it's not trivial, right? So a big chunk of our focus is still to drive local, but you know, when you start going cross-border and all that, really the different regulations on the different jurisdictions and all that really create a very big challenge. Now, even let's say, for example, you know, some of the things we're working on right now, which I can't really go into details, but where you talk about Pay Now in Singapore as an example, right? Where we are trying to see whether we can actually link to another similar national kind of rails just for that P2P cross-border payment. That itself is presenting a very big challenge. Firstly, even though let's say the technology stack the same, but while the technology stack the same, the technology is the same, but they have each market have their own intricacies in terms of how they want to handle settlement, when they do the settlement and all that. So these are some of the operational issues that we deal with. On top of that, there are also different regulations. While we may all have AML, KYC kind of requirements to, you know, on a global standard, but when you go down to the local level, it is very, very different. So there's a lot of challenges, even though that, let's say right now, the two networks are already working fine within each jurisdiction, but to actually sort of link it and cross over, it's not trivial.
Understood. So, you know, my takeaway from that is that the sort of the leaders in this space, you guys, you'll have to invest a considerable amount of money trying to homogenize and actually operationalize some of this capability. Which brings me to the question, you know, what is the unit economics for payments? Is this profitable now? Will it be profitable in 10 years? Will it be profitable at all? Or will this be a loss leader that will be used to attract and retain customers?
Well, it is definitely profitable, but you know, again, you know, you make $1, it's profitable. You make 100,000, it's profitable, right? But I think, you know, you talk about economics on a payment perspective for where there's no so-called lending tied to it, the profitability is very thin. So for us, actually, we are doing this is well, it can main thing for us is not to lose money, to break even. But to your point, a lot of it is actually got to do with customer engagement, right? Customer engagement, therefore they will have a CASA with us, and therefore with the CASA, you know, we end up with knowing you better. We have data on you. We know you much better. We're able to sort of cater to your needs, etc., etc. So it's not really saying, you know, we're going to do this just to make your money is very, very thin. Like for Alibaba, for example, right? I mean, anecdotally, I've heard is that they're actually not even making money from their payments. It's really the other stuff around the payments that's why they're doing it.
So just to tag on to that, I think, you know, as Anthony said, thin economics on payments, scale helps. But what really matters is the ecosystem that you build with merchants and consumers and banks and the products and services that you can surface based on that. So it is very much the beginning of that journey for us.
Understood. Thank you. You know, if I now just bring it back down to say the next 12 months, what are some of the biggest challenges and hurdles that both of you are tackling? You know, like, I guess to maybe make it even closer to your hearts, what would be at a higher level, whatever you can disclose, your KPIs over the next 12 months?
I think for us, you know, you said, you know, we've created the blueprint with banks like DBS. You know, making that relationship successful in a place like Singapore is really important. We've stated that we are, you know, going into the United States, which is a very big opportunity as well as challenge for us. And so making sure that we learn from our experiences in Singapore and be able to make that successful is really important. I think also being able to assist and be helpful to financial services organizations post-COVID. You know, I think there are going to be some fundamental changes in boring things like account opening and you know, enabling or reducing friction for the consumer. And how can we as Google help those companies be able to tackle those? And then lastly, I think personally, I think contactless payments is showing signs of it's going to really take off once, or you know, circuit breaker and things like that lift, and making sure that we're top of mind for consumers when that happens.
Well, for us, I mean, if you look at it from a volume standpoint, we all know that that's highly impacted. But what we're trying to do now is, at least on current, is there something we can do for SMEs and all that can help them within the current situation? But other than that, you know, we have a roadmap that we are continuing to push very hard on. But you know, I have to admit, it's a bit more challenging because of what's happening. A lot of my partners that we're trying to integrate with are also sort of distracted with having to deal with, you know, what's happening. So, but other than that, you know, I would say we are still very firmly set on our sights in terms of where on roadmap and actually delivering that out.
Understood. Okay. There's been a sort of a flurry of questions here, and I'm going to try and consolidate these into one or two sort of key questions. So I think there's one stream that's really coming across in the questions from the audience. I think in Southeast Asia, or maybe even just Singapore, it seems to be that people are overwhelmed by the number of choices they have when it comes to making payments. You know, each local bank has something. There's Nets, EasyLink, Grab, Fave, Lazada, whatever. There's a lot of wallets, a lot of payment providers. Where does this all go? Does it stay fragmented like this, or do you see, you know, some sort of nationalized push into, you know, one way?
Well, you know, unfortunately, that will always happen. Startups always, there'll be startups, new players coming in. I think we can expect that. It's not a bad thing. It keeps people like us on our toes, essentially, which I mean banks. But it does present a problem from a customer confusion standpoint, right? So you talk about area of QR codes. That's why I think it's quite good that MAS has stepped in, where they've come up with a unified, what we call a SGQR, right? So instead of having a merchant that accepts QR code, you're going to see 10 QRs plastered all over the place. There's not right now a single one where you can we are participating payment network, you can actually scan that QR. So that kind of help to reduce the clutter. But having said that, I think it does make it more fragmented. But ultimately, I think what's important is some of them will start flowing off and a few will remain, usually the case. So we just have to bear with it. And for us, we just have to continue plowing on, making sure that we are the preferred payment method because why it's easy, it's safe, people trust us. That's where we need to keep pushing on.
I'll give you a rapid answer to that. Like I think we continue to be very focused, as Anthony said, on national infrastructure like SGQR, PayNow, things like that. And then we're also creating that ecosystem for players who feel like they want to get a wider distribution to come on the Google platform and be able to reach those customers, whether it's banks or in some fintechs. Yeah.
Aman, I've got a question more specific for you. And the question is, what have been some of the biggest learnings in India on payments for Google? And, so people get a sense of the case study that could develop across Singapore and Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I think one of the things is to, you have a plan and then you launch the product and it goes phenomenally successful. Sometimes, unexpectedly in many places. I think the piece around this is to look for look for things that people are doing when you have the scale that we have in India. Things are happening on your platform. I'll give you the example of conversational commerce. That was a feature that we launched and then it just took off. More recently, we've just launched a feature in terms of discovering nearby stores, leveraging Google Maps. I think the main thing is to continuously experiment, and that's something Google is really good at. And some things are going to really take off, and some things are not. And that mentality and thinking is really critical. It's germane to how Google operates, and so it's been really advantageous. But like, how do we take that mentality and build that with banks who we partner with? And that's been a big lesson for us. There've been many more, but yeah.
Here's a result.
Sorry, my
Anthony,
is going off.
That's all right. Anthony, I've got a question for you. Do you see the take up in payments and the sort of, the push from the top in driving the adoption actually cannibalizing other revenue streams, and that being an internal adoption challenge for a bank?
So I think potentially, of course, there will be some cannibalization. If you look at, again, just within my own area of payments, right? You have cards and all that. Cards, of course, we know that, especially credit cards, it's hugely a lot more profitable. But I think, again, the beauty of that, while there has some cannibalization, pretty much, they kind of have kind of settled in a place where consumers are saying, okay, well, for larger payments, and all that, they still go back to their cards because they like their rewards. Whereas, you talk about PayLah and all that, it's really, I think, hitting a very good sweet spot. And this way it kind of overlaps with contactless, right? Where it's really talking about small value payments, right? And also is doing a very good job in tackling segments, the long tail right now that we see, that is predominantly cash-based. So it's actually right now fitting very nicely into a little gap that wasn't really, that's still very cash-based. So in that sense, we don't really see that much of it happening. So it's fitting very nicely for us.
Okay, guys, we're down to the last 1 minute. I'm going to squeeze in 2 one-liner answers from you. So first one, cash dies or survives?
Dies.
Aman?
I think slowly becomes less relevant.
Okay. Crypto, gold or sold?
I don't follow. I'm sold on crypto right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess with that, I'm going to call it a wrap. I really want to thank you, Anthony, and also you, Aman. This is a tough and busy time for all of us, despite being locked down. I'm very grateful for all your support, and more than that, for your sincere participation in the discussion today. And I thank you also to the respective organizations, DBS and Google, for always supporting worthy causes. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to the host for Insight 2020. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.